Well, our instructor needs no presentation. Dr. Todd Edmond is a legendary history teacher who has an ability to bring the past alive. So please give a warm welcome to Dr. Todd Edmond.
How we doing? Well, welcome to Conspiracy Theories Part 2. So how many of you, I'm curious, how many of you have seen last year's? Okay. How many of you were at last year's? Oh, wow. Well, thanks. Thanks for coming back. So the really cool thing is that last year, at this time when we were doing this, the thought of a Conspiracy Theories course was kind of a little bit of a pipe dream of mine that I had had for years, and well, that has now come into fruition, and we might be doing something special at the end of this today. So you have something to look forward to. Now, okay, so you guys are kind of in my classroom, a little bit bigger than I'm used to, but my classroom for the next 45 or 50 minutes here. And what we're going to try to do is I'm going to try to pique your interest on curiosity. Why do we even have conspiracy theories? Why are we so caught up in it? And in today's world, it seems like everything is a conspiracy theory. I kind of joked that I was going to not come out and just say, I'm sorry, the whole presentation was a conspiracy theory. So what I want to get into a little bit is why do they even begin, and why do we go there? And so if you're, I know Dr. Billings wants me to tell people what I think, especially about the Kennedy assassination, which we will talk about. But I hesitate doing that because I want you to figure out what you think. And so the last thing I ever want to do is persuade people to think how I think, just because I've researched something. And so what I think changes. And so I can tell you that when we get to the Kennedy assassination, I've been looking at the Kennedy assassination since I was about 16 years old. And I am not currently 16 years old. And so, and my opinion of what happened at the Kennedy assassination during that time has changed several times. And so that's part of the fun of it for me, is that the more you get into it, or go down the rabbit hole, as I sometimes say, the more that you get into it, the more fun it can become. And that's really, to me, that's what history's all about anyway. It's about having fun. It's about learning from our past. It's about understanding what's gone on. And to me, conspiracy theories are a part of that, especially in today's world. If you were here last year, that should look familiar. You know, the all-seeing Illuminati triangle. Not going to get into the Illuminati today, sorry, but maybe next time if we do this again. So where I want to start is kind of here. And why does this happen? Why do we go there? And in today's world of social media, instant communication, everything is right there all the time, and we don't verify who or what is talking to us. Sometimes my students are shocked that I'm not on social media. One of the reasons I don't like social media is that I don't like the instant conclusion that, you know, we're going to have a little talk, and then all of a sudden this must be what's happening. And it kind of drives me nuts because it's fact-less. It's just people that usually are going to go out and start talking about whatever it is we're talking about, and then start spinning it, and I'm sure you've all been there, and where all of a sudden the conversation starts going down a cliff. So now that's also part of the curiosity part of this too. So when I think of, you know, why do these ideas, you know, and beliefs, why do they begin, where do they start? If you've had me before, how many of you have had one of my classes? Wow. So if you've had one of my classes, or if you're a parent who has been listening in, one of the themes of almost everything that I do is I always say people are people, it doesn't matter what year it is. And we have the same emotions, we have the same feelings about things. And the years change, the technology changes, the clothing changes, but our feelings don't. And so conspiracy ideas, if we want to say conspiracy, maybe they don't use that word. If you go back 200 years ago, people have the same emotions. They have the same questions. And so how does that evolve? And of course, with our technology, it can get better or worse, depending how you look at our technology. So when you think of, I have the crystal ball up there. If you think of trying to figure out how things are really happening, and think of anything that you see in the media with current events. In my actual classroom, I always started the day with current events with my students. One of the reasons I said to my students was, if you don't understand what's going on in your world right now, then who cares about 200 years ago? Then, we have to know what's going on in our world right now. But then another part of that was trying to help my students understand how to get news and how to verify a story. And we'll get into a little bit of that with some of the stuff we're going to talk about today too. So the first one I want to talk about on that, if you've heard of this before, and if you haven't, this isn't so much a conspiracy as it was showing that, yes, even back in 1938, there were people saying, this new technology of radio, that radio is going to ruin everything. It's instant communication. It's in your house. You're going to sit there and just listen to everything and not verify. Okay. So on October 30th, 1938, if you have not heard the actual radio broadcast of War of the Worlds, I invite you to, it's about an hour long. You can easily find it. Go to YouTube, anywhere you can easily find it. And what happened was a young 23-year-old radio director named Orson Welles. He had a weekly show. And on his show, he would, and again, it's radio, so he would take some sort of it could be a play, it could be, in this case, a book, and he would then produce that on the radio using all of the props and gizmos and gadgets they had inside the studio. And he did something called the Mercury Theater. So on October 30th, 1938, it was a Sunday. Sunday was the big day to listen to the radio. He had an 8 o'clock broadcast every Sunday, and so he was for CBS radio, so just like we have CBS television. Well, NBC radio also had a comedy show that was very popular, and so usually on Sunday nights you picked one. And you were kind of like, I don't know, which one do you want to listen to tonight, depending on what the stories would be. So what Orson Welles decided to do, now notice it's October 30th. What is the next day? Okay. So on October 30th, 1938, Orson Welles told his crew, he said, I think it would be really fun to do War of the Worlds, but let's do it like it's actually happening. War of the Worlds was written by H.G. Wells, and it was a book that was out there. It was out there, and it's basically Martians invading Earth. And so Orson Welles, not related, Orson Welles decided we're going to do this and we're going to actually put it on the air and act like it's really happening. And it's a breaking news story. Now, later, Orson Welles said, one of the reasons I didn't think people would take it as seriously as they're going to, because you notice some of the headlines here, but he said, one of the things I was trying to do is I was trying to teach people a lesson. He said, this new radio thing you have, you just believe anything that comes out of it? Now, you could take Orson Welles to right now and say that little thing you've got in your hand, you just believe whatever it says? And so he said there was a part of him. Now, he also thought he could get fired at one point. He was 23. And so what he did was he started the show like he always did. So Mercury Theater presents War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. And Orson Welles was actually on at the beginning of it, saying, evening, everyone. Well, the problem is that people were deciding which one to tune into, CBS or NBC. And approximately 6 million people are going to listen to this at some point during his hour broadcast. Most of them, they think about 97%, didn't hear the beginning because they had NBC on. And so when he did the intro, it was quick, and then he got into the story. Well, when he did the breaking news, if you turned it back onto CBS, you heard music. Like there was a live band that was, and so you might think, oh, they must not be doing Mercury Theater tonight. And then what happens? Breaking news story. And then it gets worse. And if you've not, anybody heard this before? Okay, it's bad. I have played sections of this for my students before, and it's 1938, and you hear people dying on the radio, and of course it's an act. I mean, they're all doing. That's the picture you see in the lower left-hand corner. That's them doing it, and Orson Welles is directing, and he's hitting all of the. And so, okay, when again, it's an hour, but Orson Welles said, as the progression of the program was going, he started seeing in the studio police officers showing up. And he was like, kind of like, what's that about? And he said at first he dismissed it. And then his boss came in and said, hey, people think this is real. And he said, what are you talking about? He said, I said at the beginning of the show, they didn't tune in. And he said, so they actually think this is happening. And he goes, you got to go on and you got to tell them it's not real. And at the time, Orson Welles said, look, I got about 25 more minutes. Let me finish. He goes, I'll go on at the end. We got to have the end. And at the end, everything, New York is destroyed. So my question is, have we changed much? Because if you go watch a movie, New York City always has to be destroyed. And so there was a woman in New York who ran into a church during this, and it's Sunday, ran into a Catholic church and yelled, we're all going to die. And of course, they weren't listening to this. There was a man in Philadelphia who went to the train station, took all the money he had, and said, I just need to go west, one-way ticket. CBS radio later paid him back. There were people in the Dakotas who headed for the hills that they had to go find a couple weeks later and say it was a joke. And so now, that's the reason afterwards Orson Welles thought he was going to get fired. Instead, Hollywood hired him, and the rest is history with that. But this kind of showed everyone, oh my gosh, that if you're not verifying, he even made up the name of the town that originally the Martians landed in, Grover's Mills, New Jersey. And the New Jersey Highway Patrol later said, we were getting phone calls about, hey, do you guys need help at Grover's Mills? And they were saying, what's Grover's where? And they had no idea. But again, Orson Welles, as he talked about this the rest of his life, he said he wasn't meaning to frighten people. But at the end, if you do listen to it, at the very end, he says, you'll be pleased to learn we didn't mean it. And I'm like, and then at the end, he said, this is our way of jumping out of a bush and saying boo. And he said, so that glowing globular object in your living room isn't a Martian, it's Halloween. And then the music kicks in. So if you're at home and you're going, oh my gosh. And so it's considered one of the greatest hoaxes of all time. But he's proving a point of, you didn't turn on another radio station? You didn't realize NBC wasn't doing this? If you lived in New York, you didn't go outside and there's no Martians. But it was the fact that people just bought into it. And so this is kind of where I want to start with that. Is it a conspiracy? No. But, I always ask people, do you think we could do this in today's world? That, and people usually say, oh, with all the technology, I don't know. You get a good enough story out there and it starts spreading on social media, I'm not sure we couldn't pull this off, and at least try to for a little while. So yeah, this to me is just one of the greatest things that ever. And if you have a chance to listen to it, if you're driving home from here and you have one hour to kill, it is a fantastic show, and it's something I'm smiling because I would have loved to have been a part of it. Just scaring that would have been great. So now, yeah, so here we go. And this one kind of hits home. I'll get to that in a minute. The legend of Bigfoot. And this is something that, for me, as a very young guy, I don't even know how old I was. Was I Man, I shouldn't say this. My mom's probably watching, and she's going to say, don't tell people you went and saw it. Maybe 8, I saw a Bigfoot movie. My dad took me to a Bigfoot movie. Well, that was not a good move. I actually, in the movie, Bigfoot like reaches in a window or so. It's really bad. And so when I got home, all I know is I kind of took a thumbtack, and I thumbtacked. My bed was next to a window, and so I thumbtacked the curtain closed every night to make sure Bigfoot couldn't see me sleeping in my bed. Okay, Bigfoot. All the stories that come out about Bigfoot. All right, well, the one in the upper left-hand corner, that just happened a couple months ago. In my neck of the woods in Ohio, in northeast Ohio, there were several Bigfoot sightings in the county where my brother happens to live. Okay? And so, I mean, one after another, like 5 within a few weeks of each other. I get a text from my brother. You see Bigfoots? Yeah, I see Bigfoots. What, is he in your backyard? And now all of this started, if you're saying, wow, that middle picture is really blurry. Okay, I'm going to show you what this is. This all started in 1967. Like the craze of it started in 1967. Because you had 2 guys, Bob Gale and Robert Pattinson, that's the guy in the lower right hand with his foot up. They went into Northern California with a camera, and they were trying to see if they could find Bigfoot in 1967. So the video you're going to see is the actual video that then they released. Now, the video I'm going to show you, they've actually taken, if you're going to notice there's like a bubble around Bigfoot, they've taken our technology in today's world and kind of enhanced it, okay? So that's why there's like a bubble around him. Okay, what just happened? It's a conspiracy. So obviously they don't want us to say, oh, here comes Tobias. Do you want me to, did I hit something, Tobias? So now, everybody, Tobias Billings. This was my ploy to get you on stage with me, is actually what this is. So, now when you see this, the whole video is about a minute long, and, okay, good, cool, thank you. So, all right, so again, that bubble is enhancing it. So and this is going to be on a loop. So when they take this, and of course, everybody's going to say this was fake. When it came out, this is fake. It's not real. And nobody. It's a guy in a suit. So when you see this thing walking across for about a minute, what you have is they claim they were in an area and there was a Bigfoot, a Sasquatch, that was next to a creek, getting some water, and it was startled, and so then it started walking across, and he had his camera out. So now this is October 20th, 1967. And ever since that day, people have taken this video and torn it apart. So is it real? Could you really do that? Is 1967, did you have camera technology that would have been able to do this and fake it? Is that a guy in a suit? There's even somebody, I think he's from Texas now, and he claimed for years he was the guy in the video. That was actually me. They paid me $1,000 to do it, and I had to walk several times. But this video of Bigfoot is what kind of started the craze. Most people today, if you go online, most people will say this is fake, that this isn't real. You can tell it's a suit. But I've also seen other people who have claimed that no, there were Hollywood people in 1967 who later came out and said, look, I do costumes, and we don't have anything like that. There's nothing like that at all that we have that could possibly do that. So when you see this video, and again, it's on a loop, but what does it prove? And so my first question to you with being a conspiracy theory is, what does it prove? Does it prove anything? No, you have to take their word for it. You have to say, okay, so exactly what were you seeing? And And where were you? And now, do you think other people went to this part of Northern California and started scouring the area for Sasquatch? Yeah, all over the place. And there were even people that showed up a little while after they were there and came out and started telling people that, they said, well, you said there were footprints. And they said, well, the next day it rained. And so it washed away the footprint. And it's like, okay. Now, Bob is still alive. He is 94. And he is adamant that this is real, that they actually saw Bigfoot. And again, how do you prove it? You really can't. People have taken, Sasquatch and compared it to the trees around the logs, the gait of how, it's walking, and how tall could it be if you, put it against everything in the background. And so, but again, this is kind of what's going to stoke the fire, so to speak. Now, if I go back to this really quick. So the sightings in Northeast Ohio. So, okay, you're walking I was walking my dog at 4 a.m. and I smelled this musty odor, and then I saw this thing that my first thought, how many of you have dogs? Do you walk them at 4 in the morning? I mean, maybe you do. It's kind of one of those. And then another person would say, "Yeah, me too. I was out at 4 in the morning." You guys are really out at 4 in the morning? But then, of course, everybody wants the verification. People say, "What about you have trail cams in today's world? There's trail cams everywhere." And so you're telling me no trail cam has picked up a Bigfoot? And what about a body? That at this point in time, if we're looking for Bigfoot for this long, shouldn't we have a body? Shouldn't that already be out there? And so all of that it plays into the theory. Now, I'm just curious. How many of you actually think Sasquatch is real? I'm just curious. Like some of you are. Yeah, it's like, So, all right. Now, just so you know, Ohio, when that happened, I mean, even in my lifetime, I'm like, there's a reason my brother texted me. Really? It's like Ohio? Well, Ohio, a few weeks later, had their annual Bigfoot conference. And it's funny. Ever since then, we don't know where Bigfoot went. So, yeah, it was really amazing. Leading up to the conference, we had him. He was everywhere. He was selling cars. He was doing everything. So when you see the video, again, you can find tons of people out there that will tell you both ways. That yes, it's fake, or no, it's not fake. That you can't fake that in 1967. So whether or not you believe in Bigfoot or not, there you go. Now, next topic. And again, I'm kind of going someplace with where does your mind go with all of this? And for those of you that are really young, okay, we've got Elvis Presley. We've got Michael Jackson, and the movie Michael is now out. And you have Tupac Shakur, okay? So when somebody famous, yes, they're all musicians, but when somebody famous dies, then if it's somebody you don't want to lose, I could even throw JFK into this, to be quite honest with you. If it's somebody you don't want to lose, then they can't be gone. It's got to be something else. And so Elvis, okay. Elvis dies August 16th, 1977. I was 6 years old. I grew up, so you guys know my background. I grew up in a newsroom. My dad was a journalist. And so I grew up in a newsroom. We were actually moving to the town that I wound up living in for almost the rest of my life, even now. And we were actually in the newspaper building, okay, and in the newsroom taking a tour. And now you're saying you were 6. Oh, you remember certain things. And I remember the newsroom kind of going nuts. And because we were there on August 16th, 1977, taking a tour, and Elvis died. And in how an old newsroom used to work, there was something called the ticker, and you would hear it all the time. But if there was something really going, then you would have AP, UPS, or AP, UPI, and I can't remember the third one now. But there were 3 of them, 3 machines. And if something big happened, they would all start going nuts. And I remember that sound. I remember the news people kind of moving a lot. Well, Elvis died. and that was huge. So now, since Elvis has passed away, all the way to now, there are people that are going to tell you that Elvis is alive, that he did not die, that he faked his death. I heard the same thing about Michael Jackson, and I heard the same thing about, well, Tupac I'll get to in a second because I was teaching when that one happened, and my students went absolutely nuts on me about Tupac. I'll get to that. But Michael Jackson, Elvis, they just needed to take a break. And so Elvis was tired of all the publicity, and he just wanted it to stop. And so Michael Jackson, same thing. When Michael Jackson died in 2009, had nothing to do with the fact that Michael Jackson weighed 5 pounds at the end of his life. But, you know, he needed a break. And so everybody's seeing, now with Elvis, everybody has seen Elvis everywhere. Elvis is a truck driver. Elvis is actually the groundskeeper at Graceland. That's the latest one I saw, that he's been the groundskeeper at Graceland this whole time, and people just never knew. And it's like all those tourists go to Graceland, and he's right there. And it's like, okay. Best one I saw was in the early 90s. There was actually a TV show that was out about Elvis sightings. And they had a 1-900 number at the time, and they said, call in with your story, $2 a minute. And I'm like, what a gadget. I'm like, you guys are making tons of, but it was a big show. And the one thing that caught me in that show was, I live in Northwest Ohio, and there was a woman who told a story right over the border in Michigan, and I thought, wow, you're like an hour and a half away. And she was in a bar. It was New Year's Eve. And she was working in the bar, and there was a guy at the bar that just seemed lonely, so she went and talked to him for a minute, and then she went over to get something and realized, oh my gosh, that was Elvis, and turned around and he was gone. And it's like, that was like in 1991. So now, just so you know, I have actually figured out the Elvis mystery, so I will tell you some things that I believe. And do we have that, where we can, you know, what I believe with the Elvis mystery? If we don't mind switching to that really quick. Because I have figured this out. It took me a few years. But I'm just saying that if you know Tobias and you hear him sing, yeah, we went to Philadelphia a couple weeks ago. We're in the car, and he's humming along to some things, and I'm like, huh. And so I will be starting my own, website soon about, we know exactly where Elvis is. He found the fountain of youth, and if you just, he's Elvis. He did shrink a little. But that's part of the Fountain of Youth process. So next time you see Tobias, his name really isn't Tobias. Just say, King! And watch, he'll respond. He'll turn around and go, he'll respond. All right. But getting back to Michael Jackson, Tupac, not believing what you would say is the truth in this case, that Elvis really did die, or as they say in Men in Black, he didn't die, he just went home. That he was an alien. Michael Jackson, the same way. I've seen things since Michael Jackson passed away in 2009. His daughter, Paris, is very, very much out there on social media. There are people that say one of her bodyguards is actually her dad. And if you haven't seen that, and he's wearing the hat, and look, he doesn't want you to see his face. Well, maybe it's because he's not Michael Jackson. And then with Tupac, now when I told you I had students then, well, Tupac, when he died in 96, I was teaching, and I told you I do current events. And so I had a few rules for current events, but one of the rules was if it was a celebrity death that would impact society, that was eligible. Well, when Tupac died in 96, my students were beside themselves. That picture at the bottom, that's kind of in gold, that was his upcoming album called Resurrection. So guess what my students said? That he's not dead, Mr. Edmond. No, you don't understand. He's not dead. And I'm like, he got shot. I think he died. And they're like, no, this is a publicity stunt. That he's coming out with Resurrection's his next album, comes out in a couple months, and I'm like, okay, all right. The album came out, okay, when it was supposed to. And I was like, so where is he? And my students were like, shut up. And I was like, I'm just saying, where is he? So we just have a tendency, if it's something we don't want to have happen, then we have a tendency to do that. Which brings me to John F. Kennedy. Now, I could literally teach an entire 4 to 5 courses on the Kennedy assassination. And in the conspiracy course, it's in there. It's the biggest unit. So when we actually got to do this course and I sent them my lesson list, the first response I got back was, that's a really big Kennedy unit. And I'm like, yes, it is. Yes, it is. So because, yes, it's the biggest thing that I study, without question. But this is the most studied murder in the history of the world. And that's not a made-up fact. There have been more books written about the John F. Kennedy assassination, websites, theories. This is something people can't let go of. And to me, our current status of, everything's a conspiracy and they're not telling us the truth. This is when it started, especially in this country. If you are somebody who thinks the government lies to you every single day, it started here. Because prior to November 22nd, 1963, for the most part, the country believed what the government said, for the most part. I've always said, I am jealous of my parents' generation who grew up in an America that trusted the government. I didn't grow up in that, and I didn't get that part of America. Because almost immediately after John F. Kennedy is killed, almost immediately, you had people coming up with the theories and trying to figure out exactly what happened. Now, these are just some of the books, and then the middle one here, when you see Kevin Costner, JFK, that's a movie. And I've read most of the books that are on there, and that's just some of them. And in a good, when I say with conspiracies, when you do your own research and things, one, Crossfire, the one book that's down on the bottom there, the beginning of Crossfire, the author says, do not believe me. You shouldn't do that. Read this is my opinion, and go read other stuff. And he got me right there. I was like, okay, man, I'm going to read what you think now. Because other books will say, I figured it out. So all you have to do is read this book. You know everything about the Kennedy assassination because I figured it out. But he didn't do that with Crossfire. And so it taught me at a young age that yes, you need more sources. You need to be able to verify what one person thinks and they prove it with certain facts does not necessarily mean that's the truth. It's what they think. Oliver Stone's movie JFK came out in 1991, and millions of people went and saw it. And Oliver Stone has even said, that was my interpretation of the facts of the Kennedy assassination. And yes, he wrapped it around a true story. He wrapped it around Jim Garrison, who was a New Orleans attorney, who was the only person to ever bring somebody to trial on the Kennedy assassination. So, yeah. But he has said, that is my interpretation. When I went and saw that movie as a 20-year-old, that ages me, so if you want to do the math, there you go, you know how old I am. I was into it then, and I've always been a history person. I'm walking out of the theater, and with one of my college roommates, I'm walking out of the theater, and he's looking at me knowing I'm a Kennedy buff, and he's like, so what'd you think? And I'm like, well, it's an idea. It wasn't bad. And I heard a couple behind me were walking out behind us, and I heard the woman of the couple turn to her husband, I don't know, and say, I didn't know that's what really happened. And I literally went, and my roommate said, easy, because he knows how I am. I'm like, oh my gosh. And we get to the car, and I'm like, I said, how many people are going to watch this and think that's the truth? It's a movie. Hollywood gets it right, and it drove me nuts. That movie has done a ton of damage when it comes to people just watch the movie and think that's it. I mean, how many people watch a movie instead of reading something? I'm just saying, okay? But now, if there's one good thing that came out of that movie, was that the JFK files that are eventually going to be released, the 1992 JFK Act that was in response to the outcry from the movie, actually got the files released, which I'll get to in a minute. And it all centers, if you're not familiar with the assassination, he is in Dallas, Texas on November 22nd, 1963. He's riding in an open car, so the middle picture is actually a picture shortly before the assassination. And he is killed in broad daylight. And he was doing a motorcade through downtown Dallas. He was going to a luncheon. And towards the end of the motorcade, actually, they had made it through the worst parts where he could have been killed. The Secret Service then didn't have some of the protocols they have now. For instance, no president will ever ride in an open limousine ever again. But there were certain protocols they didn't have in place then. Again, more innocence, I would say, in 1963. And so when he was shot, the ripple effects that happened throughout the nation, that somebody like him, he and Jackie, his wife Jackie, sitting next to him in the car, you could say they were a power couple. You know, if you're into Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, yeah, okay. People in Dallas showed up to see her, you know, not so much to see him, to see her. And so, yeah, it had a ripple effect throughout the country, throughout the world, and it was a little part of the innocence of America that just died. Because that, since really you could say the last one that had that effect would have been Abraham Lincoln. I mean, that type of an impact. And so it was kind of this couldn't have happened. Now, I've heard people jokingly say, oh, he's not dead. Yeah, he's dead, okay? But it was more of the impact it had going forward. So what happened, and where I think all of this conspiracy stuff we do now, where I think it all came from, is what happened is less than a year after the assassination, President Johnson, who took over for Kennedy when he was killed, he asked the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Earl Warren, to put together a committee that would tell America what happened. So there's an official video. I'm not going to show it here. There's no way. Called the Zapruder film of the assassination. The assassination, to show you the time period, that video was not released until the 70s. Because you don't show that on television. They would not release, the Kennedy family didn't want the autopsy photos or anything about the autopsy, and you can kind of see the autopsy diagram there. They didn't want any of that released to anyone because that was considered too graphic. And, you know, today's world, if something would happen that was bad, would you expect to see it on social media within an hour? Would you be disappointed if you didn't? Okay, it would be, somebody's got to have video. And so, well, they kind of hid that and shielded the public, thinking that's, one, it's disrespectful, and two, you don't need to see that. So that, of course, is going to add to what people are saying, what are you hiding? So 10 months later, and that's actually Earl Warren, the middle picture, handing the Warren report to President Johnson, saying, here it is. It's 888 pages long. Yes, I have read it. There are also 27 volumes of all the research they did. I'm a nerd, okay? But it's not exciting reading, but it's there. And they basically tell America, okay, here's what happened. And I'm not going to get into all that right now. But to me, that moment when September of '64, they hand it to Johnson, and then it's released to the public, does the public want to read 888 pages? No. Even in today's world, they don't want to do that. So they look to the media, and they're like, what's the quick version? And so the media gives them the quick version. There was one shooter, Lee Harvey Oswald, 3 shots, 6 seconds. That's it. No conspiracy. We're done. We're moving on. And for the most part, the general public said, bleepity bleep. Okay? I don't believe you. That's not right. What are you hiding? And they couldn't believe it. There's no way. Who the heck is Lee Harvey Oswald? Well, we would have liked to have told you who Lee Harvey Oswald was in a trial, but unfortunately, Lee Harvey Oswald was killed 2 days later on live television by Jack Ruby, and we never got to do that. So the fact that he's never put on trial, that adds to the mystery of all of it. We never got to see him on the stand. We never got all of the evidence put out in a courtroom, and so that's going to add. The interesting thing, if you can't really see the middle there, at the time that the assassination happened in 1963, and then the Warren Commission's released in '64, at the time it happened, 52, when they polled America, 52% basically said others are involved in the assassination, whatever that meant, okay, others. And so they hadn't seen anything yet. There really hadn't been anything out there yet in 1963. And so, but half of America that was polled said, yeah, they did it. And well, who's they? And again, I take the class. Okay, we'll get into who they is. But they did it. Well, then if you notice, by the time you get to the 70s, it's up to 81%. Well, other things had happened by then. Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated. John F. Kennedy's brother, Bobby, was running for president in 68, looking pretty good. He got killed. The they started to grow. And so if you notice in the 70s, it's 81%. And that's about where it was when I started getting involved in looking into all of this. And then into the 2000s, we're still holding steady. And then all of a sudden, by 2013, we're down to 61% again. It's starting to go down. And it's like, well, okay, so what's happening that's making it go down? Well, one of those things is the fact that JFK files have been released. That starting in 92, after the movie JFK came out, that you had the government say, okay, we will actually start releasing the files. And so now, the last file dump happened a couple months ago, about a year ago actually now, and a little less than a year. And the latest file dump was 63,000 pages. And that's actually nothing. One dump was 500,000 pages. And so now it's the CIA, the FBI, everybody, the government basically going, here you go. And now the latest dump, they said, that's it. Okay? Well, the problem with that was that years before that, they had said, that's it. And then before the latest dump, they said, hey, wait, we found some more. And so what happens to conspiracy people? It's you found some more. And so no matter what they say, nobody's going to believe that everything is out there. And so, but as more people are reading the files, reading the evidence, reading what the Warren Commission had, or some of the things they didn't have that with our new technology, then people are starting to say, well, maybe it's not as twisted as we thought it was. And now I told you guys that my own theory has changed over the years. I even in college, when I was a senior in college, my senior thesis, my historical thesis, was a mini book on the John F. Kennedy assassination. I have since read that back to myself. I would go back to my 23-year-old self and say, are you an idiot? It's like, what are you doing? I had everybody involved. I think Mickey Mouse was involved in my theory at one point. So again, you're allowed to change your mind as you have more evidence. And so, but do we know? I have people all the time say, do you think we'll ever know what happened to John F. Kennedy? We know. Which is it? To me, it's all there. It's like, if you want to think the mafia did it, the CIA did it, Vice President Johnson did it. I mean, whatever you want to do, aliens, whatever you want to do, all the evidence to me is out there. Because the latest file dump didn't tell us a whole lot. It's like, yeah, we already knew that. Yeah, we already knew that. Yeah, we already knew that. And so now it's more of what is the truth? And I always say this, what if the truth was this all along? What if? I'm not going to tell you what I think, okay? But what if that, let's say hypothetically for a minute, this was the truth. And for the last, 60 years, all we've been doing is making up different theories of what really happened. But in that time, we've had this corrosion of trust. And to me, that's the impact of things like this. That's the impact of the Kennedy assassination. Why is it the most studied murder in the history of everything? Because one, people, I want to figure it out. But to me, this is what started all of the, you could say, modern conspiracy. Everything's a conspiracy. So the moon landing, 9/11, everything is a conspiracy. I'm not really here. I'm just AI. I'm sure we can make that work, okay? Now, what I want to leave you guys with, if you've never heard this before, and I got to give a shout out to my family right now that is watching this in Ohio. So they're doing a little watch party, and I'm guessing that my kids right now who had me in class are going, oh yeah, you got to do this, Dad. So if you have never heard the coincidences between the Lincoln and Kennedy presidencies and assassinations, it's downright scary. And I'll give you some, and then you can go look at some others. I'll give you the one that kind of blew my mind away. So first of all, okay, both presidents, they're 100 years apart. So John F. Kennedy was elected in 1960. Abraham Lincoln was elected in 1860. So, okay. Each was elected in 56 to Congress. So President Kennedy was elected in 1956 to Congress, and in 1856 it was Abraham Lincoln. And those type of things are like, all right. But each was in the presence of their wives when they were killed. Each was killed on a Friday. Each had a child die while in office. They each had 3 kids. One of them died while they were in office. The vice president for President Kennedy, who took over, was Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson was born in 1908. The vice president for Abraham Lincoln was Lyndon Johnson. Lyndon Johnson was born in 1808. If you take the actual full name of both Johnsons, they have the exact same amount of letters in them. Lee Harvey Oswald, the assassin who was, said to be the official assassin of John F. Kennedy. Lee Harvey Oswald was born in 1939. The assassin for Abraham Lincoln was John Wilkes Booth. John Wilkes Booth was born in 1839. If you take John Wilkes Booth and Lee Harvey Oswald, they have the same amount of letters in them. So I'm not done yet. So some of you are kind of looking at me going, I'm not done yet. I'm not even to the good ones yet. So both were shot in the back of the head. Both assassins were killed before they could stand trial. Yes, Lee Harvey Oswald was from the South. John Wilkes Booth was a Southern sympathizer. Some people will tell you he was from the South. Technically, that's not true. Now, Booth shot Lincoln in a theater and fled to a warehouse where he was caught. Lee Harvey Oswald shot Kennedy from a warehouse, the Texas School Book Depository, and was caught in a... That's a little weird. Okay. Ford's Theater is where Lincoln was when he was killed. Kennedy was riding in a Lincoln made by Ford. And so, I mean, it's weird. The one that gets me, the one that's like the coup de grace, that when I first heard all of these, and I'm like, this is just too weird. The one that's the kicker for me. Okay, so President Kennedy was killed in Dallas. And in the 60s, if you were a politician and you went to Dallas, good luck. Other politicians had been spit on, yelled at. It was a hotbed. So when he was doing his little tour of Texas that he had planned in 63, and this was all about his re-election campaign in 64, well, his secretary said, "You're going to go to Dallas?" And he's like, "Yeah, we're just going to do a quick luncheon. It's not going to be there very long." And she's like, "Okay, I wouldn't go to Dallas. I don't think that's smart." And okay, well, Lincoln's secretary, and I'm going somewhere with this. Lincoln's secretary told him the night he went to Ford's Theater. By the way, he had seen that play before. They went because the actress that was the lead actress in that play asked them to because it was the last night she was performing. They were going to go to a different play. They were going to go see Aladdin at a different theater in Washington. Fate, But when he was going to go to the theater, it's only 5 days after the Civil War ended. And his secretary said, "You're going to go out in public? You sure you want to do that? Given that the Civil War is over, given the animosity that's still out there." And he's like, "Oh, I'll be fine." Lincoln's secretary's last name was Kennedy, and Kennedy's secretary's last name was Lincoln. That's when I stop. That's the part of me that's like, oh, okay, this is weird. So if we get to 2060 and we have a president named Lincoln Kennedy or Kennedy Lincoln, I'm just saying, but that's, yeah. So if you've never heard all of that before, and there's more, but I'm going to stop there. So here's my point in what I'm saying today, don't be this guy, okay? When you're looking into conspiracies, whatever it is, okay, find the facts. When I was a 23-year-old doing the Kennedy assassination, and my parents would probably attest to this, I had it figured out, and gosh dang it, I was going to tell the world. I was going to figure this out for once and for all, and that was it. And everybody's going to, well, I guess you guys know me for a different reason, but I had it figured out. I didn't. And so I was in the process of learning how to do research. And whatever it is that you think, when I have somebody come up to me, for instance, and give me a conspiracy theory, we didn't land on the moon, okay? No, I didn't say I believe that. I'm saying that's a theory. And some of you, no, I didn't. But okay, we didn't land on the moon. I always say, prove it. Prove it to me. Show me, okay? Tell me, show me, talk. And usually if it's, well, I didn't, well, then go do the research then. Don't get on social media. Well, Billy Joe Bob said that his dog's cats, chiropractor that said their aunt said they knew a guy. And it's like, do the research, okay? And find out where the research takes you. The best example I have of that, when I started my teaching career and I believed one thing about the Kennedy assassination, my high school history teacher still taught there. And he knew all about my fascination with it. And by the time he retired, I was several years into my career. And one of the last conversations we had before he retired and left was he said, "Do you still believe what you believe about the Kennedy assassination?" Because he didn't. He and I talked a lot about what he believed. And he had researched it too. And I said, I don't believe what you believe, but I'm starting to change my thoughts a little bit. And we had that conversation. He goes, "Why are you changing your thoughts?" And I told him some of the research I had done. And he told me, he said, "Todd, keep doing that." And he said, whatever it is you believe, always be able to back it up. And so that's if you take the conspiracy course, I hope you do, remember, you need to have an opinion, but be able to back that up with why you think that and where did the facts lead you to think that. Because in the end, it's what we have as opinions. So hopefully that makes sense. And if you ask me what I think about like the Kennedy assassination or something, I'm probably going to dodge it. Because again, I don't want you to believe what I believe. And I want you to go do the research on your own. You believe what you believe. And whatever it is. And if you happen to turn on the radio and you hear Martians are invading us, maybe verify that with a couple other sources to make sure that's true. And if you happen to see Elvis, somewhere, I'm just saying. So also, one quick thing. There are great books out there about conspiracies, tons of them. And this is actually one that I've recently read. Brad Meltzer, he does a show on the History Channel. And you'll know good books when you see them because, again, they should be telling you in here, hey, look, I've done some research. Here's what I think. But I'm going to present it the way I think the facts point. And if that's the type of stuff I want to read, I don't want to read the people that were like me at 23 years old that said, I've got all the answers. And all you have to do is read this and nothing else. Find things when you read or websites or whatever it is that inspire you, that tell you, go and do other research. And that's the good stuff that you can actually use. So, all right. So you guys ready for the big moment? First of all, thank you for coming. Thank you so much. The fact I was asked to do this again and the fact that there are more people here than there were last year when we had to move to this room because of the interest and because of you guys, we have the course. And I can't stress that enough. So thank you. Okay. This is the big moment. So I'm going to come over here. And when I hit this button, and this is not a joke, when I hit this button, we're going to do a countdown. And at the end of the countdown, the course is going to be live. So those of you that are about to graduate, if you're about to graduate here in a little bit, if you want to skip that and go straight to the course, I understand. But all right, here we go.
Countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
There we go. All right, so I am going to be out in the lobby here in a few minutes. If you want to pop in and say hi or get a picture or something like that. I know some of you have already, but thank you again so much. I cannot thank you enough for coming.